This isn't the server that I meant to invite you to.
Oh, it's not? Oh.
No. I just clicked the first random server that I thought that we made.
Oh, shoot. I'm streaming on TikTok. No. Turn that one off. That's fine. It's not like anyone I know is gonna watch it.
Let's see. Actually, let's head over to the other server that I have. That way I don't bother the non-existent activities going on here.
Okay.
I'll send you an invite.
Okay. All right. Um. Oh. This one.
Yeah, this one.
This one. Okay. This one's so much better or something. Okay. First things first. Since I started this stream, might as well introduce ourselves. Um,
Why would we do that? Don't we want to, like, leave our audience in the dark as to who the two boffins talking to them are?
yeah, no, of course not.
You want to be polite? Goofy goober.
Friggin space magic.
Okay, well, enough of that nonsense. Yes, we are apparently Friggin Spacemagic. Don't ask what that means, because I will not explain it to you. I am Twilight, the other dude, that's Dopa. And yeah, we are capable of speaking, and so we speak and we pretend we're intelligent.
Yeah, we do things sometimes.
As you've probably noticed if you don't live under a rock, humans in general, don't need excuses to speak. So we are going to indulge in the faculties of communication for the purposes of entertainment, and yeah, let
Yeah.
the let the internet pretend that they care or not.
All right. Yeah, I think step one is to change my profile picture. So I'm gonna look
And we're
for.
doing this live on stream for some
Yeah,
reason.
yeah. Step one is finding a different profile picture. I think
Yes,
mine's copyright, so
yeah.
yeah, I
Let's
got
just talk to ourselves.
yeah, I gotta fix that. I gotta fix that somehow. I think I think um I think if I ask AI to fix this, it'll be fine. Because AI does original stuff, right? Relatively,
You funny man.
relatively original.
Yeah, that's original is exactly what I would call, assembling the entire creative history of humanity into one place and telling it
Yeah,
to regurgitate nonsense. Garbage in, garbage out. Very original.
yeah, yeah. I would say so. Uh, okay, okay, perfect. Let me just, let me just, um, you know. Oh, never mind. I can't change it. I'm in streamer mode. Uh, well, guys, we're gonna be copyright for this entire time. That's okay.
Man, I have garbage mic quality currently.
Nah. It can't be worse than mine. Doing great.
Hmm.
Anyways, first order of business was again tech news because that's what we do best.
Which we didn't actually take any notes or do any study, so we're just making this up
Yeah,
as we
we
go.
we just kind of do things on the fly, but that's okay. Yeah, I
This
think
is fine.
this is fine. This is fine. Um, Nvidia, right? Um,
NVIDIA, they exist.
they exist. They do things, and they are in the like trash can right now. They are in the dumpster.
Not financially, of course. They're
No,
doing excellent
no,
financially,
of
but
course.
like they are not doing their fans, their uh, shall we say, customers any favors in a lot of the decisions they've made lately.
No. In fact, a lot of the graphics cards, because they put on these new um power connectors, and they are not treating the customers well. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I imagine if you're at all interested in tech news, you've probably heard something about it because scandals be scandalous. If you're not interested, then congratulations. You get to hear about it anyway. So for the longest time in GPU history, we used pretty standard power connectors, the ATX form factor. Been using that for years, and whenever you need more power for a beefier GPU, you just plug in another one. NVIDIA decided, in their infinite wisdom, and not at all because they want to use proprietary tech because that makes them more money, they decided in their infinite wisdom that it was in the best interest of everyone to instead of use, three 8-pin ATX connectors, to instead go ahead and make us all use a 12 volt high power connector that has what 12 pins. So you're using a higher voltage, so hypothetically you can carry
Hmm.
more power. But the fact that using fewer, connector pins means that more power, more amperage current is going over each of the pins. Um, and if you know the first thing about electricity, that means they'll heat up. And the thinner a piece of wire, the more it heats up. And
Don't
because these are wires, it heats up enough to cause some interesting effects, like melting plastic.
don't get me wrong. It's a great piece of newer technology, and I love the fact that they're trying to innovate on it. But the system wasn't like in place for them to do it yet.
Well,
So.
it's that's up to debate. And there's something to be said for switching all power supplies to a 12-volt standard, and then have the voltage stepping for non 12-volt components be done by the motherboard or something like that. It's a good thought, but it was not well implemented in the case of NVIDIA because somehow the design is managing to concentrate a large amount of the power down to just one or two wires rather than distributing it properly across a larger number of wires. Of course, the way electronics work, not all of the input power is going to go across all the wires because you need grounding wires and the pinout layouts are going to be different depending on the different standards. But
Yeah.
somehow they thought it was a great idea, or some design flaw caused this to occur, that they dumped a majority of all the amperage you're trying to put through it onto a single cable, causing it to extremely overheat in certain cases. Now, of course, as they did with the last generation, because yes, ladies and gentlemen, this did happen before, where cables melted for high power, high performance GPUs.
Hmm.
As they did with the last generation, they blamed it on user error, but a lot of testing by some of the industry leads, Hardware Unboxed and the like, or Derbauer, I think, did some testing as well. Um,
Hmm.
has indicated that the problem is more a design issue than a user error issue. Very disappointing.
Disappointing indeed. But have they done anything to fix it? No. They haven't. They have left their users in the dust, and apparently they just don't
They're
care.
Yeah, they're passing the blame um onto the consumer, which you know to give them credit, a little bit of credit, it's only percentage-wise not an extraordinarily high percentage of their GPUs that are encountering these problems, but that's compounded when it's the high-end GPUs that people spent the most on that are potentially being ruined by this because they're drawing a lot of power, and um, also the GPUs in question, the 5090 in this case, are extraordinarily hard to get your hands on currently, given that their launch, which happened very early this year, did not see a lot of them being stocked on the shelves or in digital marketplaces in most vendors. and consequently, they were all either bought up quickly by eager customers or more accurately, by a lot of scalpers who immediately tried to resell it. So the 5090 is extremely rare, extremely hard to buy, and extraordinarily expensive. And then you have a not 0% chance that it will randomly melt as soon as you put it in your computer and start actually using it. But
Yes.
yeah, I wouldn't dog on them too much. Technical issues happen, but at the same time, you know, they
From a
ought to do something
company
about it.
so big, from a company that has so much money, you would think they would have, fixed the problem. They would have come out with recalls, like with cars, right? When Elon Musk when some of his cars have issues, he does a recall. When Honda's cars have an issue, they do a recall. When NVIDIA's graphics cards have an issue, they left their consumers in the dust and sent a message out saying it was the consumer's fault. Like, you know, there should be a little bit of
I mean, at least you'd want to see is reimbursing, compensating for fried GPUs, but I don't think you can legally hold them to that, nor would you want to legally hold them to that until it's provable that this is their fault. So we'll leave that where it is. I think there's other matters to be discussed. Um,
indeed, indeed.
so not exactly tech news, but a bit of a technology related rant. Silpa and myself are both very much gamers. We appreciate the fine art and computer science that goes
We're
into
gamers, guys.
making these things, and yeah, we enjoy playing them. We're nerds. We have a fun time with a variety of games between us. Any serious gamer, I wouldn't say hardcore gamer necessarily, but like
Hmm.
somebody who cares about the industry, who cares about quality games, good games. It's noticed a few concerning trends in the industry. Um, and I say concerning in that it presents a potential threat to um a potential threat to how games are done in the sense that um the quality is being affected and the playability is being affected. And those concerns, those particular trends that we're noticing are mainly in the subcategories of content and also game performance, like how well it runs on a given piece of hardware or on a computer.
Hmm.
Content-wise, there's been a lot of particular decisions made by the development team for like story writing and whatnot, where instead of making a game that's designed to have a good story first, hire they'll hire consulting groups or they'll hire employees who are particularly trained or at least dedicated to a particular agenda, and then proceed to push some politics and such that breaks the immersion in the game, and most gamers just aren't interested in. Like, give me a game, give me a game world, and let me lose myself in it. I don't want to hear about politics that are going on in the real world. And I say that generically because that is a generic problem. You can pull up anecdotes that are particularly annoying, particularly concerning, but at the end of the day, just like if I'm going to indulge in escapism, then please let me escape this nonsense.
And the thing is a lot of games are also set at an older time period, right? And a lot of this modern politics doesn't, you know, isn't there in the older time periods, especially if it's a historical game. So,
I think the best current example of that, best meaning worst, is what Ubisoft's been doing with their latest Assassin's Creed game, which you may or may not know, is set in Japan.
uh-huh.
Back in like the age of the samurai and
Mhm.
before the Western influence really kicked in, as they wouldn't expect a lot of what we consider, Western ideologies to play a role in it. And it's a fictional game, sure. They're creating their own game world and whatnot. That's great, but um, we have we have a bit of an issue when Assassin's Creed, the company Ubisoft, they make a focus on telling us that we strive for historical accuracy, or everything is based on true events and real people. And then they proceed to pull stunts that are entirely not historically accurate. Like, you know, you want a token female character, make your ninja character a female. Great, we like female ninjas, badass warrior chicks, awesome.
Mhm.
Except for the fact that female ninjas were not a thing in the time period in question. Or even more, I guess, egregious, especially if you're asking the people who live in Japan and know a thing about their culture, is a female sumo wrestler.
Mhm.
It's like a cultural slash religious slash traditional thing that sumo wrestlers are males, not females, and that for again cultural and religious reasons, because the sport, the practice, is sacred in a certain sense to them and important to the foundations of their culture. A female sumo wrestler or even a female in the sumo wrestling ring is a is a bad thing, a taboo thing. So
Mhm.
for the purpose of simply having a token female included, they decided to upset history and rewrite it from a modern Western uh you know woke mindset. It's woke. That's the term that everyone uses for it.
Mhm.
Where it's just a ideology that's far from traditional. Again, fine if it's a fictional game, not so fine if you're telling us that you are the gold standard in historical accuracy, and then completely throwing out history.
Yeah. Again, if it was something for 2025, it was a 2025 based game, and they added that stuff, it would be different. Okay. But it's not 2025. It's a historical based game, right?
Hmm.
And that's
That is-
just the way it is. Another game
Yep.
that again follows that trend is Civilization, right? Civilization.
Oh yes.
Talking about this earlier. Civilization, okay? They strive very hard to be as historically accurate as possible, but, you can put your own tweaks within the storyline, right? As you build your civilization. The fact that they add all that wokeness into the early section of the game, right? It just kind of hurts, you know?
And by wokeness, of course, there's I think from so grain of salt disclaimer here. I have not played Civilization 7, which is the game that we're
Yeah,
referencing
we're mostly
currently.
referencing that one.
I've played Civilization 6, 5, 4, even a little bit of 2. I'm a fan of the franchise, so I know the
Mhm.
roots it's coming from, and I also know the stunts that they've pulling in game, that been pulling in games, I should say. What we're referring to as far as wokeness goes is certain design choices. Again, it's a creative rewrite of history based on, real historical people and real historical countries and whatnot, and then, turn you loose to remake the world in your image. But and I think this is the most um questionable example of the wokeness that they chose to implement, was the various world leaders that you could choose. A lot of them that were available are sure historical figures of some note, but not exactly world leaders. Like and Stopa, if you could pull up the roster, that I would appreciate that.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I
yeah.
think an example that caught my eye to begin with was when they announced that one of the headline leaders for, well, America. They have a system where your leader and your country don't have to be from the same time in history, so that's actually very clever. But the one of the American-based American history leaders that they chose was Harriet Tubman, if I recall correctly. Um, which is from history, the a black woman who was important in the running and organization of the Underground Railroad during pre-Civil War times, during the Civil War, that kind of thing. Cool individual who did cool things. American leader? Not exactly. Like,
Not, yeah.
um, did good things, respectable individual, did not lead a country. Now, I don't know if they've how much they've changed since that was first announced pre-launch, but you know it's one of those things where if you're gonna tell me these are leaders and they're based on real historical leaders, why is that the example you choose? Whereas you've got other excellent examples like Napoleon, a very famous leader who led a country, conquered the world, basically. You got Caesar Augustus did the same thing. Machiavelli wrote a treatise on being a ruthless world leader and had some interesting ideas there. Maybe not the huge influential character um of being a leader himself, but did interesting things. Tecumseh, a leader of the Native Americans, right? Fought the American people. Um, I forget the exact time period, but he led his people. That qualifies as a leader.
Hmm.
Benjamin Franklin, kind of a leader, although I don't know why they wouldn't just choose the president. Benjamin Franklin was a founding father, respected statesman. Cool. Although honestly, I would prefer if they went with what they did in Civilization 4 back in the day, where they're like George Washington,
Yeah.
duh, American leader. Abraham Lincoln, duh, American leader. Or Julius Caesar, or um,
I think if they have to pick a world leader for a country, they should pick an actual world leader, not some political agenda nonsense leader, right?
they're trying to make political statements in a game that is about rewriting politics and rewriting history so that you can get away with all this. It seems like they're dragging down the immersion and not really for a valid reason.
Like I get it.
So I don't
Maybe
particularly appreciate it.
maybe in this world of America, Benjamin Franklin somehow became the president, but in all honesty, he wouldn't be fit to be a president. That wasn't his role in the United States of America ever. You know?
And role in history, yeah. But you know,
Yeah.
it's not nearly as egregious as the latest Assassin's Creed thing, so
Yeah.
I'm
It's
I'm
it's
willing
just
to sort of give it a
frustrating.
pass.
It's just
It, it,
frustrating
it
sometimes.
seems unnecessary. I think though that there's a lot of other annoying things content wise, but that would be a bit much to dive into for a cursory glance. Another thing that I am possibly even more upset about than the content is the development philosophy. How the software is programmed, and most specifically optimization.
Oh, yes. My favorite topic.
So, okay, something to know about me. I am of an engineering mindset. I like it when systems and machines are developed in clever ways and run smoothly and run well, and my brain is always looking for ways to tweak it so it'll run a little bit better. If you're running a computer, you'll get the extra frames per second, the extra few hertz, dozen hertz, thousand hertz, you know, of clock rate to just give you that extra edge. I like edging, in the non-sus manner. I like edging out leads in a very non-sus manner. Um, and the way you do that in software programming is by finding more efficient ways to run your subroutines to accomplish various tasks, to put less junk on the screen to render, less geometry to calculate for, less lighting paths to simulate, right?
Hmm.
There's been a trend in the video game industry where they being the game developers, incentivized by the manufacturers, and just the industry as a whole, have been moving away from making games that run well on existing hardware that are like optimized that anybody with a potato graphics card, like a what's the potato? A like 960 GTX from what 2015 or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, with somebody like I want to see games where somebody with an absolute potato can at least play it, make it accessible, make it go to a large audience. But a lot of games coming out these days are far from optimized.
Well, I think a great like comparison, right, is you look at a game like COD Mobile, right? COD Mobile has been optimized so much in the last almost 10 years to the point where it runs basically as well as the normal COD with insanely good graphics on basically any phone at this point, right?
And it helps that they've been working on it for, 10 years of development over time, and the more time you're baking, proverbially, a game, and the more time you have it, being tested and whatnot by the community, by your game testers and whatnot, the
Mhm.
more bugs you'll find, the more optimizations you can do, the more you can patch it to make it run better.
Mhm.
Um, and
Indeed.
with the particular example of COD Mobile, that's a game that was designed, built to run on the hardware of 10 years ago. So it ran okay then. It was playable then. With the hardware of today, it's blazing fast for a lot of the newer stuff. We like to see it.
Yeah, but
On
if you
the
compare that,
offensive,
if you compare that game though to a newer game like say Marvel Rivals, right? Marvel
which is
Rivals.
potatoes, apples to potatoes comparison, given that Rivals is a PC game and COD Mobile is, as the name suggests, mobile, but there are lessons to be learned. Continue.
Yeah, the point is that Marvel Rivals relies very heavily on the existing hardware in someone's computer, whereas a game like COD Mobile relies heavily on the actual, code in the game, the how the game was, developed in order to, you know, do some fancy programming tricks to make it workable and usable on old devices, right?
Yeah, the and this is something we see with older games where hardware wasn't that great. You couldn't lean on the reliance of everybody who's playing this has a graphics processor with X number of thousand rendering units, CUDA cores or whatnot. And so instead you have to make it so that it'll run on subpar hardware, and the way that you can do that is through code. Whereas now, the developers have been assuming that everyone's going to have a relatively high class graphics card or just won't be interested in the game. I think not an excellent example of this because it sort of has a very interesting niche in the community, but an example of a game where the developers never really cared about optimization and always just cared about um making the most use of, like, the most expensive use of top tier hardware is Cyberpunk.
Mhm.
If you know about the time around its release, which what was that? The 2017, 2018. It was it's
Um.
getting pretty old now. Um, Cyberpunk was basically made to make use of, like, the brand new next generation's kind of hardware. Hence its focus on visuals that relied heavily on ray tracing hardware that Nvidia was introducing with the 20 series
Mhm.
RTX graphics cards, right? Cool stuff. Like, you can play the game without it, but it's designed to make use of those technologies. And sure, groundbreaking for its time. And nowadays, 2020, thank you. And nowadays they've figured out, efficiency enough they've worked out the efficiency enough that you can run it on something like a Steam Deck, which is not a high power piece of hardware, um, by any
Mhm.
respect, but is pretty decent. However, that doesn't mean it runs well on anything. Now, um, if you adjust your expectations, you adjust the graphics. You can tone down the graphics settings, turn off ray tracing completely, and whatnot, and it'll run a smooth playable experience on a lot of hardware as long as it's sufficiently modern. But like, if you want to use the flagship features, and we've seen it being tested on a lot of YouTube channels, tech reviewer channels, and whatnot, because it remains the flagship example that NVIDIA likes to use. So might as well test the actual example they advertise with. If you look at how it's doing with flagship cards like the 5090 or 4090 or even 3090, top of the line of the various generations, um, it's struggling, right?
A lot.
You use all the features, right? You're supposed to have all the eye candy, all the bells and whistles.
You turn it all
Crank
up.
the ray tracing up, crank the path tracing up, and you'd think that a
Turn the
game that
FFX.
came out 5 years ago would be running better on 5 years worth of improvement in hardware, but not quite. You're getting 20, 30 FPS at best. Which okay, adjust your settings, adjust your expectations. Nobody's going to see it running natively at 4K in all of its glorious ray trace, path trace splendor until you get the frickin' NVIDIA 90 series graphics card. Okay, that's fine. That's that's a design choice that Project CD Projekt Red decided to make it far more intensive than current hardware can support. Um, but this is kind of just a symptom of the problem, right? I haven't been ranting about Cyberpunk to tell you that somebody designed a game that's ahead of its time. I'm telling you that there is a lot of performance that is being left on the table in this example as well as others. For instance, at launch, Cyberpunk was notorious for not only having extraordinarily low frame rate, even with the less than maximum settings, but also being extraordinarily glitchy, implying that CD Projekt Red and the whole development team and whatnot did not do proper game testing in order to figure out all the glitches and patch them.
Hmm.
And then with all the performance bugs and memory leaks and other nonsense bogging it down, didn't they didn't fix they didn't spend enough time fixing the optimization up so that it would be ready for release. So it was released as a half-baked project in order to show off NVIDIA's new features. Um, and that's fine. A lot of people do that these days. They call it a pre-release, a pre-order, or like an open beta. But no, this was advertised as a finished game. And yet it wasn't playable for a lot of people, at least playable in the sense of what the developers meant you to experience
Hmm.
until, people's hardware caught up to it and they started optimizing the software. Um, if you'll indulge me in more ranting though, Cyberpunk is an example, but hardly the best example. Because there's a far deeper systemic problem that's been plaguing video game design that goes beyond just particular examples of development teams not doing their due diligence or not baking the game long enough, so to speak, that all the bugs and optimizations are worked out. The example, something that um, any gamer who cares about what they're seeing on the screen might have noticed, and you might not have the words for, but if you've been playing games for a while, you know, I think you've probably seen that when you're using playing new games, you're using the various settings that'll give you high frame rates. If you stand still, right, for like a cinematic experience of a game or a game that's advertised as looking good and having all sorts of complex scenery and beautiful lighting and all this
Hmm.
stuff. If
Has
you
all the
stand still,
things.
a static image looks pretty sharp. As soon as you start moving,
Even a
it
little bit.
immediately becomes a blurry mess, right? I think some examples include well, Cyberpunk is an example. But I think the some of the later Tomb Raider games, or if you want a really modern example that we'll have to touch on later for a different reason, the latest Indiana Jones game um, is is that kind of way where you stand still, all of your glorious ray tracing, accurately calculating the behavior of light in nature. It looks pretty pretty. You start moving, and then things start getting smeary, and the visual quality degrades. Why is this? Well, it depends on exactly what game and what features and what graphics card you're using. But normally, usually, the reason for this, the underlying problem that we're all experiencing, has to do with anti-aliasing. There are an anti-aliasing. I should
Mm-hmm.
I should clarify is the techniques used to turn the jagged lines that are rendered on the screen when you're calculating geometry for things. Because of the way the calculations are done, it has to round to whole numbers. It can't use perfect precision, and so it'll have sort of stair-stepping pixelations on the edge of lines. Anti-aliasing is a set of techniques where you can recognize those and what causes those and mitigate it, make the lines look smoother, less stair-stepped, which is especially helpful for games that are rendered at less than or equal to the resolution of your monitor. Um, Whereas, if you're rendering at a higher resolution, you can downsample and extrapolate pixels. It's complicated
Mm-hmm.
technology. If you want a better explanation of, what anti-aliasing is and why it's important, there's a YouTube channel called Threat Interactive, or it's a dude, a kind of a game studio actually, startup that's looking at these things, figuring out the systemic problems. That's where I'm getting a lot of the things I'm rambling about here. So check that out
Yeah.
if you want a better explanation. But the summary version of this issue is that anti-aliasing is important. It's how you make scenes look good. Um, in games, it's how you make it look not like you're playing on a Nintendo 64 or something silly like that. Um, because you have smooth lines at odd angles. And for the longest time, there have been various methods of figuring out how those lines are supposed to be drawn properly. But the in recent days, the approach to doing that has shifted from calculated approaches, mathematical approaches of extrapolating the positions of pixels and calculating how the pixels between them are supposed to be to um, AI-based solutions and temporal-based solutions. So TSAA, if you've looked in the settings of your favorite video game, modern video game, you might find under anti-aliasing settings for TAA or
Mm-hmm.
uh, DLSS or FXAA, right? These are all various versions of either the temporal anti-aliasing, where it takes a handful of frames in a row, and compares the changed data to sort of substitute from previous frames what should be appearing on the current frame,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of guesstimate what's in between.
Basically, AI.
Well, the AI really gets nasty when you start doing DLSS and FXAA, if I'm understanding correctly, which is the AMD solution,
Uh-huh.
where they render a low resolution image, ask an AI to upscale to a higher resolution image, and the anti-aliasing, quote unquote, is done by doing that. Um, so you're not actually using mathematics and rendering techniques to calculate this. You're asking a machine learning model to fill in missing data, which fine in concept. But if you've ever
In
seen any
concept.
AI generated images, you'll notice that they have a lot of subtle errors. Imagine generating 60 of those per second, or modifying existing images, with 60 frames per second. The errors compound, things get messy. Add that temporal element, where it's pulling previous frames to tell you what's on screen now, and it'll start ghosting, where the data from previous frames is not being referenced properly, and it's displaying out of sync, out of date information,
Mhm.
and just blurring things across the screen becomes a mess very fast. This this problem that I've been rambling about, this problem with anti-aliasing, as well as a lot of other, you know, graphical defects that exist when playing a game, doesn't need to exist. If only they made the game run well in the first place. So the more expensive traditional anti-alien, anti-aliasing
Anti-aliasing
solutions.
solution, yeah.
Yes, the solution is anti-alien. So that the more traditional solutions work, or you could even render it at a higher than native resolution and downsample it. I believe that technique's called super sampling. Um, or just pick an art style that's not going to have jagged edged lines and whatnot. And this is an example of poor optimization. There's a lot else going on, but moral of the story: if you're looking at a video game nowadays and wondering why your games don't feel as good to play and don't look as good to play as they used to, it's a systemic problem, and it's entirely the fault of the developers of the game and also the developers of the engines, the game engines, the ones that give developers the tools and whatnot, for incentivizing using the latest buzzword AI solution for these things, rather than just spending time to make a polished product. It's
It's
bothersome, is
it
what I
it's
would say.
really it it just shows laziness, honestly. It shows that they're only after one thing, and that's, money. And
And spending time making the game run smoothly takes away time from whatever else you're doing, and means you have to spend longer baking the game before it's worthy for release. It's ready for release, right?
yeah, it's like as a
And
consumer, I shouldn't be, forced to optimize my own game.
that's the thing that people do. I mean, there's mods for the modern games that are moddable. Because there's a lot of efforts to not make games moddable for some reason. Whole another matter, but there are some mods for a lot of modern games that are specifically there as community-made patches to make a game that runs crummy run less crummy, or fix a particular bug or problem in the game that the developer should be able to fix themselves, should have already fixed themselves,
A long time
and did
ago.
it.
It's
So
it's frustrating. Um,
much frustration. But I could ramble about that all day. My voice isn't going to change anything. But if it entertains you and inspires someone else to do better, please
it,
do. I like good-looking video games. How is it that a video game for the Wii, the frickin' Nintendo Wii, a 20 almost 20-year-old console,
no, it is 20
right?
years, I think.
2006 or 7 was the release year, so coming up pretty close. Yeah, how is
2006.
it? How is
Well,
it that Super Mario Galaxy, rendered in like 420i or whatever, looks better than Cyberpunk 2077? And I can give you the answer. It's because the art style is superior. They 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 made the aesthetics suitable for what they were trying to do. They didn't overdo the scope. Thank you. 2006. They didn't overestimate the scope of what their hardware is capable of. Right? They made the art style suitable for the Wii, and they made it simplistic, and they didn't overclutter the scene in a way that would overstress your rendering engine, your GPU, and it looks good because they spent time making textures that fit the world, and scrolling texture techniques, or the way that the scenery is placed. It was all very intentional, all very deliberate, and all very artistic, and that made it beautiful.
I think
Now, you,
I
please
think
go
the
ahead.
main reason because of that is because they looked at the Wii and they're like, wow, the Wii isn't a very powerful device. Granted, it was very powerful for its time, right? But it's not a very powerful
Kind of.
device. And they're like, okay, well,
It
we
was it
have
was
to.
sort of a the GameCube's processor just advanced to the next generation. It's literally the same processor, just upgraded in stepping improvements and
Hey, they
whatnot.
also added a little bit more RAM.
That's true. Very true.
The point is like the game developers looked at that and they're like, oh, we actually have to work hard to make our game fit the console, right?
And Nintendo is actually very good at that. They understand, and that's the benefit of having a um console that you develop your hardware, you develop your software, having a console ecosystem. They know the limitations very well, and they've been working within limitations like that for years and making the best of it. Nintendo does an excellent job of making pretty games. Do they make good games? Eh, pretty often.
Some of them are good,
They're
right?
fun. Do I agree with Nintendo as a company constantly copyright trolling everybody and stopping people from playing their games on non-Nintendo hardware through emulation and whatnot? No, I don't agree with that. I very much dislike copyright trolls and emulation haters, but if you don't want customers, then be that way. But I can still respect when they know what they're doing and do it well. It's specialization, optimization. That's
Yeah.
what we like in this industry.
Yeah, I agree. It
And
it
please take my opinion with a grain of salt. I am just a humble nerd who's passionate about making video games look good again. And
we will
I will
make
tell you
video
exactly
games look good again.
we'll make video games great again. It'll be tremendous.
It'll be tremendous. The other thing is like you have to take what we say with a grain of salt because we've thought about this for a long time, right? It's something that keeps going on within our mind. And we have a bit of pent up rage, against these people. So
And
of
to be clear,
course,
just because we have thought about it doesn't mean we're experts. We just pretend we know stuff.
nah, we're definitely experts without a doubt.
Trust, bro. Trust me, 100%. I know
100%,
everything
guys.
I'm talking about.
100%, without a doubt.
No, we're just little goofy internet trolls. Oh, look at me, just a little guy. You wouldn't want to hurt a little guy. I'm a little guy.
On a completely changing the topic, we've talked about that for
Yes, please
far
do.
long enough.
I could ramble all night.
Um, I wanted to bring up the iPhone 16e just because of um, Apple's lost opportunity here. Okay, the iPhone 16e was supposed to be the budget lineup of the Apple phone, right? It was supposed to be the one like iPhone where you could buy it, you could still say you have an iPhone for the social stuff, right? But it's not gonna break your bank. At a sweet $600, it's hundreds of dollars less than the other ones. My issue with this phone is that it is 6.1 inches, and of course the price. From the last generation, they increased the price $100, and they increased the size by like half an inch. Okay. I personally like small phones. I think that having a smaller phone keeps you off your phone longer, which makes you enjoy the world around you more. The fact that they didn't like go and take this opportunity to make the iPhone 16e a say 5.7-inch phone is just a lost opportunity in my opinion.
Well,
Oh.
to be fair, people tend to like their phones bigger, and some people would be willing to pay $100 for just an inch. Um,
Some people would pay a
eh,
lot more.
but yeah, there's a matter of personal preference. Personally, I think there's a market for, as you're talking about, the smaller phones that are actually pocket size as opposed to the behemoths we have. Something I find absolutely hilarious about the iPhone E, aside from the fact that apparently they couldn't, you poor plebeians who have to buy the the cash tier iPhone can't afford the consonant S anymore. It's no longer the SE. Aside from that, the $600 some iPhone here is the same price as a triple folding phone
Oh,
from Huawei.
wait,
Like a
yeah.
freaking flagship from China, which
It's
is
not just any phone. It's a triple fold phone. It's a
state of the
tri.
art technology here, guys.
It's not
And
just
Apple, you paid the Apple tax, so you just get one small screen.
it's hard to just buy it new, but like you can buy it off eBay for like, oh, this is the wrong one. You can buy it off eBay for pretty cheap, you know. It's just sad, you know.
Kind of hilarious though. How I would ask how dumb does Apple think we are, but we're not the target audience, are we?
Um,
Apple, there's a Apple fan community who is absolutely rabid about these things. Actually, I'm starting to think that the target audience for this particular Apple product is, like you said, people who want uh the recognition of having an Apple product so that their text bubbles don't show up a different color in iMessage or whatever.
mhm.
Or creators who just need the bare minimum basic iPhone for a particular application. There's some things that only run on iPhone for some reason.
Um,
So
I
there's a
personally,
market for it.
I have two phones in my pocket whenever I go out. I have an iPhone and I have a normal Pixel. The reason I got an iPhone was because I was an iPhone hater. Still am. I actually hate the iPhone ecosystem and iPhone itself. Um, it hurts. It's a very dumbed down phone. It definitely has its use case scenario for people who just aren't that tech savvy. If you aren't very tech savvy, a lot of stuff is confusing. And the seamlessness of the iPhone, the fact that you get your apps and like nothing else, that appeals to a lot of people. I get it.
It just works.
It just
Buy your
works.
mom an iPhone.
But that's the thing. That's where that saying goes to. You buy your mom an iPhone. You buy your dad an iPhone. You buy your grandpa an iPhone. You buy your grandma an iPhone. You don't get an iPhone yourself because you don't need it. For yourself,
At least at least if you are a power user. The Apple ecosystem seems at times hostile to power users. Like my Android phone. I can root that thing if I feel like it. I can plug it into my computer, run a Linux command terminal on it,
hmm
and manually control everything. An iPhone would probably sue you if you tried to plug it into a computer.
there's a lawyer in the phone ready to sue you at any moment available. You know.
Imagine that. Yeah, iPhones are Apple products in general. They have a particular market, and they market to either high tier creators who want to be on the inside of the ecosystem and don't mind paying a Apple tax for that, or people who want a simplistic system that's familiar to the thing that they've always had, that will always just work. But everyone in between is kind of left out in the cold.
Yeah,
Speaking of,
let's look at these prices real quick. You get or the customizations for the 16E real quick. You get two
oh yes,
colors. You get black and you get white.
wow,
You
much
get
option, very
three
well.
storage options. For 599, you get 120 gigabytes. For 699, you get 256, and for $900, you can have half a terabyte.
Which is just that's really just a backhanded um statement right there is, oh, you want a half terabyte iPhone? Haha, you should buy the basic next tier iPhone if you want to be that basic, or are you too broke for it?
It's like you go over, you're like, oh, I don't have enough money for the iPhone 17, whatever. Like, but I'm going to get the iPhone 16e, and I just need to take a lot of pictures, so I'm just gonna take the 512 gigabyte version. Oh wow, I paid just as much as the normal iPhone. It hurts. It really
Or you
hurts.
can have an iCloud subscription. You don't need to have storage space when you can store it in the cloud. Nothing bad ever happens.
Ugh,
iCloud. So,
iCloud.
speaking of disappointments in since apparently this is a tech podcast now. Speaking of in technology, the everyone's favorite not Apple, that is Microsoft, is continually trying to be more like Apple in that they are trying to lock down their ecosystem and push things upon you, whether you like it or not. Like shoving apparently everything in Microsoft Windows is now called Copilot for some reason.
Everything,
Uh, like even if Copilot's supposed to be the branding name for like their AI assistant, right?
but just that.
And then and then literally everything became called Copilot. You have Microsoft Office with Copilot, Microsoft Windows PCs, Copilot enabled. You've got the Qualcomm Snapdragon for Copilot or some silly thing like that, right? Everything is Copilot. And they've made a meme out of themselves, but it really begs the question of why? Do you think your customer base wants an AI to be nagging them with every single native application that you use? Or even more concerning, perhaps, do you think your customer base wants their computer to be quietly recording everything that they do so that it can do your Microsoft Windows recall feature and literally anything you have ever done with your computer is saved in a snapshot on your computer. Sure, in concept, very helpful. I'd like to go back and see what I
Okay,
was doing a few
in
days ago.
concept.
In practice, that is the first ingredient of a dystopian surveillance state, and I think too many people have read 1984 for that one to seem like an attractive idea.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm perfectly fine with Big Brother always watching and recording my computer, so that when the FBI comes, they can just, everything is there. I can't
No,
delete
no.
anything
What they're gonna
anymore.
do is they're just gonna ask Copilot. They're gonna be like, "Hey, Copilot," and then they'll be like, "Show me any incriminating data on this person's computer." And they're like, "Oh, here you go, sir."
Honestly, though, I wouldn't be surprised if that's part of the backhanded agenda of AI is just finding clever ways of incriminating people.
I
But
I wouldn't
honestly,
be
though,
surprised.
I think uh, I think there are a few things that AI should be used for, and there's not very many of them that involve talking to an AI. Instead, an AI should be out of sight, out of mind, an intelligent machine. Like my phone, my phone is an advanced one. It's a what is it, ROG 8 Pro Edition,
You
I
have
think is the
Gemini,
proper
right?
title.
You have
I don't
Gemini.
use I don't use Google AI. I don't use
Oh.
Gemini. I turned off that nonsense.
Oh.
I turned it off hard and made it never start up. But it has an AI optimized processor, like Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, it's so it's got AI capabilities. The developers at ASUS slash ROG decided to make use of that in what I think are very nice ways. Like for my photos and videos, it has actually just photos, semantic search, where I can go to my photos page, photos application, type in the search bar cat, and it will find not only the image files that have cat in the title, it will search my images for the creature, a cat, existing in the image, right? Semantic search, semantics being, words. It can interpret words for you. That's AI in action. It can see what's in a picture
Mhm.
and interpret the to make that easy to search up. I would really dislike that, except for the fact that it runs locally. Right? It doesn't need to leave my phone to talk to the cloud to scan my images. It all happens on my machine.
It just happens.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'm happy with the ghost in my machine indexing my photos to be easier to search, as long as it doesn't give my data to anyone else. That's what AI is supposed to be for. Intelligent machines that make our lives easier. AI is not supposed to be an advertising tool that masquerades as a assistant built into your Windows search bar.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're already implementing the quote unquote AI stuff too much anyways. Like, at a certain
At some
point,
point,
half the
it's
stuff
a
isn't
buzzword.
AI. A lot of it's just fancy scripts. So it's like,
Yeah, the buzzword AI is a buzzword. The buzzword of the last decade um was cloud, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Everything's
cloud.
cloud computing, cloud storage, cloud-based
It's
applications.
more
Now it is
secure.
now it is AI computing, AI storage, AI-based applications, AI crap.
Indeed.
So I'll pass. It's a buzzword, and people don't understand what it actually means, and
No.
that's fine. That's
Yeah, it's all right. Um,
consumerism will be consumerism.
on the other hand, have you heard of Microsoft's new quantum chip that they just released?
Yeah, with the clever like physical architecture that makes it harder to disentangle.
Yes. Yes. So I want to talk
Seems
about
fair.
that for a sec because I actually do think that it is breakthrough technology type deal. It is something that
And to
they've spent a
clarify,
lot of
chat,
time. Hmm.
to clarify, we Sopa, myself, we are both, highly qualified PhD graduates. We're doctorates in quantum physics, so we know entirely everything what
We
we're
know
talking
everything.
about and are extraordinarily qualified to talk. I'm kidding, of course. We're just dumb dudes on the internet. Carry on, please.
Yeah, so um yeah, so um Intel's or not Intel's but Microsoft's actually it is Intel. Funny enough. Microsoft bought a certain part of Intel which was working tirelessly on um these specific processors which are, you know, used for quantum computing. Um as far as this goes, I'm genuinely curious to see where it goes because um, I actually don't know if this is a type of thing where it's all talk and like no work, you know, or if it's actually something revolutionary, you know, because as far as
There's
chips goes, this is one of the first, you know, actual like made like man-made quantum chips type deal, you know.
Yeah, a lot of previous quantum processors, analog processors, annealers, that kind of thing, um, have been less chips and more akin to like the vacuum tubes and whatnot of early linear computers, right? That
Mhm.
kind of stage of high scale, big size of physical hardware. Um, but this one, not only is it a integrated silicon chip, which is significant. But this particular, um, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Majorana
I don't know.
chip is significant because it makes use of a clever topology design, so to
Mhm.
speak, that does uses physics principles that are beyond my current level of understanding, but basically has a arrangement where it'll be far less prone to responding to the interference surrounding it, so like electromagnetic interference or interference introduced through thermal kinetic energy and
Mhm.
whatnot, and far less likely for the particles involved to become disentangled, which would break their ability to be quantum computers, or to do quantum processing, I should say, to be qubits, which
Indeed.
simultaneously makes it easier to scale up because you can pack more of them more tightly together with less support hardware, and also makes it more stable at, realistic operating conditions for common use. So not um, cryogenically cooled to a few degree or a few fractions of a degree above Kelvin. So if if what they're saying is going to pan out, great. There's a lot of people who know more than I do who are doubting that what they found is actually what they
It's
say it is. But
it's really
I
hard to
think the results
believe.
I
Just
think the results will speak for themselves one way or another, and time will tell. But it is
yeah,
interesting
I feel
headline.
like this is a end of 2025, early 2026 type deal. I think they're going to really try and ride that hype train all the way until then. Personally,
And as always, take the news as well as our commentary with a grain of salt because quantum, like AI, is very much a buzzword
Mm-hmm.
and is often used without any relation to what's actually
Quantum.
quantum and what's not.
Yeah, actual quantum stuff is genuinely impossible to understand. I have tried. It
He's
hurts.
tried and he hasn't understood it, you guys. So
I've
nobody will
tried.
understand it.
If I can't do it, nobody can.
This is this is how reality works, guys.
Genuinely though, a
Yeah.
lot of it just doesn't make sense. You really have to, the suspension of disbelief type deal.
No, I don't feel the need to suspend disbelief. It seems pretty intuitive at a certain level.
At a certain level, yes. Um,
It requires you to um reject isn't the right word, but like put aside some preconceived notions of based on
yeah.
how the like macro scale world works, but like the principles, like any principles in proper science, are consistent
Okay, they're
and
consistent,
repeatable.
but what you do is you have to reject. I think reject is a great word. You have to reject all forms of known science and then look at quantum science. And then if you want to go back to normal science, you have to kind of ignore quantum science. It's like two completely different sectors of the world. It's quite
Which
unique.
the world is made up of the same stuff.
Hmm.
The quantum understanding of the world, well, it might undergird the world of classical physics that we commonly interact with. Its behavior is often very different. So having a sort of blank slate approach to it might help for understanding for certain circumstances.
Hmm.
But it is important to keep in mind that it's still the same world, and even though the explanation for how it occurs is different, they accomplish the same thing with the same predictable outcomes at scale.
Indeed.
Um, so I don't know, it's interesting. Time will reveal more, and with
Hmm.
time we'll learn stuff.
I agree.
I think it's fascinating though.
um, Moving on to more tech news, though, Oppo came out with their new phone. Okay, it is
Because we are a tech show now.
we are a tech uh podcast today. Tomorrow we might be
I
something
think we're
else
just
though.
I think we're just a rant podcast. We
A
just rant
rant.
about
We
whatever
just
comes to
rant
mind.
about stuff. Um,
Skylab over here, Twilight over here does ranting. Sofa interjects with commentary and tries to keep me on track.
I keep the topics going.
Dynamic duo.
Um, the Oppo came out with a new foldable, and it is the thinnest foldable to date. Okay, it is only 8.93 millimeters folded,
Smaller than a 9 millimeter bullet.
and it is just really really thin. Hold on, let me find a picture of the other, like the one by Samsung. The one by Samsung is also really good, but um, it compared to the Samsung foldable, it's just incredibly thin, right?
I like innovation.
As far as power goes, it has the Snapdragon Elite. It's a really really good phone. You know. Oh,
I find it funny sometimes, what you get out of capitalism. Because nobody 10 years ago thought to themselves, you know what I need in my hand right now? I need a phone that I can fold into half without breaking the screen. And that'll be just like fine. We had those. It was called a flip phone, right? But but no, I'm like it's somebody came up with this idea and then convinced us all that we desperately needed it, and I am here for it. Please market to me more.
I
I
I
love to see it.
I just love to see innovation. I love to see it when someone takes an idea and they just run. They go all the way, right? Foldables have been out for about 6 years now, and each and every year, companies make leaps and strides. Some companies don't come out with foldables for 6 years just to make sure that the one that they do come out with is perfect, right? And I genuinely love to see that. Um,
And the engineer in me is very happy when companies give the time, spend the due diligence on making their product, you know, not only passable, but like a good product that is going to work well for everyone and be everything it's advertised for. I think I think my favorite company who does that is probably Valve slash Steam.
Oh, this again.
Yes, this
Yes,
again.
yes.
I have to glaze Lord Gaben. It's in my contract.
It's in your contract.
But okay, so I have a Steam Deck, the
Mhm.
OLED one. I like it. It runs the games that I want to run in it pretty well. I have a Valve Index because that's where the PC VR industry is sort of standardized.
Mhm.
Even though it was old hardware, even when I bought it, I still bought it because it's everyone has agreed that despite the fact it came out in what 2019, 2018, it still holds its value as being one of it's the flagship, is
It's good.
the
Yeah.
industry standard. And the reason it's the industry standard, and the prime example, the benchmark that everyone compares to, is because they engineered such an excellent product and supported it so well. PCVR wouldn't really exist if it weren't for Valve. Same with gaming handhelds, right?
Mhm.
So there were handhelds like the Aya Neo, for instance, that came before the Valve Index, or sorry, Valve Steam Deck. There were headsets like the HTC, the basic HTC models, and I think some of the early Oculus models that were meant for PC VR that came before the Index did.
Mhm.
But Valve hits the scene, first with the Index. They're like, okay, we're using this for what people are we're designing this for what people are actually going to use it for, gaming. So what are the design features? It's going to be lightweight enough that it's not going to hurt your head after wearing it for a while. It's going to
Mhm.
have outstanding audio quality both for the microphones and the speakers. It's going to be ergonomically comfortable, so it's not like concentrating all the weight in terrible, terrible places. It won't give you a headache. They spent hours and hours and hours, days, months refining the
All the
design,
time. Yeah.
testing all this nonsense to make sure it'll work properly. The controllers, they figured out, okay, what are you going to be doing in gaming? It's first and foremost probably going to be a gun because people like games where they shoot stuff, even more so in VR. So it's shaped like a pistol grip. But
Mhm.
then they came up with the brilliant idea of, okay, what if you want to grab things in VR? You need to be able to release the controller. So they made it so it straps around your hand and retains your hand between the strap and the grip, so you can release it entirely and it won't fall to the floor. And we're like, okay, great. We have a headset, we have a controller, we have the best display that you're going to be able to render VR stuff to, and we have nice Fresnel optics, which is the best that we can do with current technology. How are we going to actually make your tracking, your spatial positioning work well? And the next best alternative for like the what the Oculus was doing was using a compass and an accelerometer to get a rough estimation of what you're looking at, which is
Mhm.
passable when you're like watching a VR movie or something. But any gaming experience where you have to look around suddenly or move around the room, that would get nauseating extraordinarily fast. So between Valve and HTC, they developed a brilliant system, the Lighthouse system, where you just have a couple of base stations on opposite sides of your room, and it's literally just a little spinning platform with a bunch of infrared lasers that paints the entire room with spinning freaking laser beams. And then your devices, your headset, and your Knuckles controllers, and even later on down the line when they made the body trackers,
Mhm.
would pick up those laser beams and then send the information that they're picking up back to the computer. The computer combines info from the lighthouse telling it, how fast it's spinning, where the laser beams are in their spinning cycle and whatnot.
Mhm.
The controllers, the headsets, everything sending back the precise time at which they received the ping from the laser beam drifting across the sensor, and which sensors received it at what time. And they basically recreated the global positioning system with frickin' laser beams for extremely high precision, millimeter precision, inside of your house, just so you can play a silly video game. And Valve did that because they wanted something that's not just a passable solution for VR, they wanted something that is the best solution for VR.
Yeah.
And of course, same with the Steam Deck. They not only made a good controller with a custom chip that they cooperated with AMD to develop, and put it in a handheld with a good battery and a screen. That wasn't good enough for them. They took their experience from developing the Steam Machine project from a while back, where they were kind of making a pseudo game console. And they're like, well, we've developed a Linux operating system. Linux is far more efficient than Windows in terms of power requirements and processor requirements, and and we can customize it to do anything we want. So they created a bespoke operating system, SteamOS 3.0, I believe is the designation.
I think they're at
And
3.0 now. Yeah.
it's a brilliant setup because the for most ordinary gamers, some ordinary gamers you could even say,
hmm
um, the Steam Deck is you boot it up, and Steam Deck's always going to be in big picture mode, gaming mode, I guess you could say. Where all you've got is a very smooth, very easy to navigate, very intuitive UI. That
hmm
again, they spent hours upon hours testing and days
Yep.
upon days refining and making better.
Yep.
Um, and all the normal gamer needs is that UI, and they can do everything they want with their Steam library from there. If you're a power user like myself, and you want, additional capabilities, and you want to install non-Steam games, and you want to run additional Linux-based applications in the background,
hmm
you can do that too. Because unlike Apple, they give you control over the hardware you bought. And with a pretty intuitive process of press and hold the power switch for options, you can say, hey, I want to go to the desktop. I want to install a Minecraft client. I want to install a Dolphin emulator. And,
Yeah.
because Steam, because Valve did such a deliberate, careful, and thoughtful job of making and optimizing the hardware and the software together. And then, unlike a lot of their competitors, gave this set of tools to the community to do what the community wanted to do with it. It's because of that that the handhelds in general are, a growing industry, and more specifically, the SteamOS community is
It's so
thriving,
big.
right?
Yeah. I
Um,
think I think that the Steam community in general is only going to get bigger. If you just look at the stats as it is, you look at how many people have Steam, there's 33 million people online just Steam right now.
right now.
Online right now. They have the app open. Out of those 33 million, 8 no, almost 9 million are playing a game. Users love to play on Steam, okay? Even if they don't own the games, like actually own the games, they love to play on Steam because Steam
That
offers usability like nobody else and functionality like nobody else and
and Steam's
security
been doing this for years.
like nobody else. They've been
Yeah,
doing
the
this
truth.
since what 2009, right?
Thereabouts, yeah.
Yeah, it of course they're going to be ahead of everybody. Of course they should be the industry standard. They're some of the
And
people who started it.
and yeah, I have huge respect for Valve because they're deliberate and they're intelligent and they're focused on making good products, not just making short-term profits for their shareholders.
Yeah.
But I think one of the most interesting things about Valve's approach to all of this is how they play the long game,
Mhm.
right? When they were developing virtual reality, Actually, no, even earlier than that, when they were developing their platform, Steam, right?
Mm-hmm.
As the great Lord Gaben himself recognized, games, video games, online video games, access, and the issue of piracy. It's not about people don't want to buy games. It's not about people want to screw over developers. It's a service issue, like iTunes and LimeWire and what, for instance, where people are downloading music from the internet. It's because it's a service issue. Apple came up with iTunes. People started buying it. They made huge profits. Steam did the same. They're like, we have video games. People wanted to buy our video games and install them on their computers, but trying to find a copy in store is inconvenient. So let's make it convenient. People have internet now. We'll build a way for them to buy games across the internet, download them across the internet, and play them with easy access to the internet. Revolutionary concept.
I mean,
Steam does that, they make bank.
in order to download Steam and play a game, right? It will take like 6 buttons. You click the download button. You type in your email and a password to create an account, right? You click download. Then you click install when it downloads. And then after you click install, you you'll be on the home page and you literally just click one of the free games on the home page and you click install or add to library and install, right?
And if you already have a Steam account, it's even easier. You probably have something in your library. It's lined up on the corner of your home screen. You can just be like, click that, click install, and wait a few minutes, and you'll have a game to play. They
Actually,
streamlined the process. They made the service easy to access.
Steam also just added something that I am actually really, really excited about with Steam Family, actually.
Oh
They
yeah,
they made it to where you can add a friend or a family member to your Steam account, basically. And if you're not playing a game, they can borrow that game remotely and play it, as long as you're
again,
not playing it.
solving a service issue here. Instead of people pirating games, you can instead lend it to your friend, like you would back in the good old days. You're not using it, give your CD to your buddy. They can put it in their computer and play it. Steam does
Yep.
the same thing digitally. Um, but yeah, so Steam's playing the long game, right?
Mhm.
They recognized, and before they were Steam, they were Valve. They developed, games like Half-Life, Half-Life 2, Portal. They recognized a problem in PC gaming that service is a problem. Getting games to people in a convenient way was less easy than people just pirating games. So they came up with a solution. They asked for a modest profit for the service they're providing, and people are happy to play that. Fast forward a few decades, here we are, and they're one of the richest on a per employee basis. They make the largest profit of any company in the video game space, and definitely up there in terms of companies in the world. All because they recognized an issue and they made a solution and supported it for the long term. They made a long term sustainable solution, and gave that to the people. They worked with the people,
Yeah.
and people paid that back in the long run. Same with the Index, where they created a long term ecosystem for VR. Same with SteamOS, where
Mhm.
and this is where it gets really clever. They're playing the long game, right? They recognize, especially recently, the more that Microsoft does various antics. They're recognizing that Microsoft has the power to be like Apple, where they're like, hey, now in order to do anything on our platform, that is Windows, that is almost all computers statistically in the world, in order to do anything on our platform, you need to pay us money for using our store because everything must go through our store.
Mhm.
Steam recognizes Microsoft could do that if they wanted to,
Mhm.
and so they've been playing the long game, developing SteamOS and slowly working people into the ecosystem. And now they're at the point where if Microsoft decided to pull a stunt like that, Steam could just say, "Okay, we're not releasing a Microsoft store that we're going to have to pay a cut to them. Instead, anybody can just install SteamOS on their computer for playing games if they feel like it, right? They're building towards that point, and that serves the dual purpose of protecting Valve's interest, Valve's profits,
Mhm.
while simultaneously protecting the consumer by extension, by happenstance, I guess. Um, in that Microsoft is going to be incentivized to not try anything stupid like that.
To be fair,
And
Steam is worth around $11 billion. So
chump change, not chump change.
that's
And yeah,
billion with a B, by the way.
a
It's
B.
a B. Like they have the power to say no to people. Like if someone doesn't like what Steam's doing and they want to like go on strike or something, Steam can just cut them out. You know.
And they're in this position of power, financially speaking, as well as in many other ways speaking. Because they played the long game. They did the unglamorous solution of developing the tools that nobody would use for a long time,
Mhm.
and now they find themselves here. I have respect for the long game, for visionaries who know that it's going to take time for their dream to be realized, but also know that they're making a product they believe in, and yeah, people will pay that back in turn. Turns out, guys, turns out it does pay to have integrity.
That's crazy. Cause me personally, I would have thought never that could never happen. But you know what? Here we are.
And that just loops back to some of the things that I touched on earlier, where I expressed my frustration at marketing gimmicks or terrible, short-sighted, decisions when it comes to game development, where you don't optimize it or you put nonsense in the story that breaks immersion, right?
Mhm.
Your gamer community you can't take for granted. The community that you've fostered. If you take that for granted, people will remember, right? They'll remember the things that you've done, and they won't feel inclined to support you in the future. That's the way to kill yourself in the long term. If you play the long term smartly, the smart thing to do is to make a product that you believe in and let people support you in whatever way they can, whatever way they feel fit, or fits the product you made. And people will reward you handsomely for just respecting them as a
Yep.
community, as individuals.
That's one thing that people don't understand. A lot of industries, they rely on the customer, especially in the tech community. They rely on the customer,
Most industries do, unless you're the government.
right? Um, like any industry, they rely on the customer. And if you're like EA, you're going to say, F you to every single customer you have every single day. So, and look at them now, right? Look at where EA is now, and
Not doing so hot
they really
compared
aren't
to where they were.
compared to where
EA
they were
used
in
to be
2017.
right.
It's
They used to be like the gold standard for your favorite sports games and your all of the Star Wars games are through EA, and then like since in even just the past 5 years, 7 years, they've gone from producing and hosting, sponsoring such banger titles as like Battlefront and Battlefront 2, absolutely brilliant games those. And the Need for Speed franchise and whatnot, to through their decisions made of constantly trying to extort more money for less value from their customers, the customer base is getting fed up, and your your latest half-baked battlefield or yeah, your latest half-baked Battlefield game is not getting the same player base that they thought it would, or people are less interested in your new iteration um of sports games because you lost the licensing with FIFA or whatever. I don't know. I don't know the specifics exactly on
so
that deal, but I heard whoever was doing the FIFA games lost their licensing agreement because they're being dumb.
I'm looking at the EA stocks right now, and they're kind of doing good, ups and down, and then they got this huge spike because they got the Star Wars contract in like 2014 or whatever. They made all the Star
That was
Wars
good for them.
games, and then it's right here at around 2018 where they suddenly have this dip, you know, which often that also follows suit because isn't that when they stopped supporting um, Battlefront 2 or whatever?
In late 2018,
Late 2018,
I want to
like
see
like
Battlefront
December
2.
7th.
Yeah, I think that's kind of that it would be
Yeah,
about the time that they ended support
that's when
or ended development anyway.
they ended development for Star Wars Battlefront 2, and they just had a stock drop. They went to $85, and then even adjusting for inflation, they're now at 122. Even adjusting for inflation, that's like barely any gain for a company. You know, it's just
Whereas Valve is not a publicly traded company, but you know that they're always climbing.
yeah, they're not a public company. You can't just look them up. Sadly, um,
It would be fun statistics to have though. But
I would
yeah,
I would love that. Yeah.
EA is he has made decisions and they're facing the consequences. They're hardly the worst example of a company. I think a far worse company in terms of decision making would be Ubisoft, who are literally
Mm.
closing down. They're going bankrupt now because of the backlash they're receiving. The fact that nobody wants to buy their half baked and entirely woke games. Like Star Wars Outlaws, for instance, with frickin' Mam Solo as your protagonist. Sure, open world game, biggest open world realistic looking Star Wars game probably ever. Excellent. Except for the fact that your main character looks ugly, your story is not interesting, and all the things that attract people to Star Wars are not really present
There.
in any meaningful
Yeah.
way.
It's actually interesting. I'm looking at the stocks for this one, and you can see they 2018 the stock went up in early 2018, and then in late 2020 the stock went up, and ever since
I would
then,
say I want to say the 2018 would probably correspond with the most recent major like Assassin's Creed
yeah,
at that time, and then the
the
2020 would be hype for Star Wars Outlaws, and then it just went downhill from there.
yeah it just went down. It had a 85% negative decrease since then.
Rough.
It's
Wouldn't
actually
want to be
more than
them.
that. It's like 90. It's insane. It went from uh, a peak of $23, and now it's only $2.
Man, Ubisoft is almost more of a omen than a name because it certainly does not make me hard. What?
They're worth the same that they were in 2013.
Look at this. Got this high quality market analysis here.
Hmm.
Versus pull up Nintendo. I want to see Nintendo.
Nintendo.
They're publicly traded, right?
Yeah, yeah, they are. They are. Okay.
Because they've it's not entire. It's kind of apples to oranges, given that
Okay. Okay.
they're
This one's
making
actually
their own
really
hardware.
cool because 2006 is when the Wii came out, and they had an insane peak.
Dude,
Um,
the Wii was the peak of all consoles of all time, if you ask me.
I think the
Wii is where
PlayStation.
console peaked.
I think the PlayStation 2's peak actually. I have good
PlayStation
reason.
2 was revolutionary and whatnot, but Wii is where console got into the hands of everybody and the
That's
minds of
true.
the general public.
That's true. I think as far as like, cause like I'm a performance guy, right? I look at like stats. So
Yeah,
for me specifically, I have to look at the PS2 and be like, oh my gosh, that's insane, right?
yeah. For
They made a supercomputer out of PS2s, okay?
in
Like,
terms of generational uplift,
yeah,
PS2 is probably the biggest jump.
But for Nintendo, you're right. That their stock, um, it makes sense where they're at right now. They're getting a whole bunch of hype because of the
It's true.
Switch 2 right now.
I'm disappointed that they didn't come up with a creative name. Every time they've made a iteration on a name, Wii U following up on Wii, it has not turned out well for them.
I don't. I think the Switch 2 is actually going to be a flop. I'm not going to lie. I think people are going to buy it and hate on it immediately because it's not going to have the performance increase that people are looking for.
Yeah, I won't make any predictions at this very moment, but
That's
I,
just my
I
personal thoughts.
I'm not seeing the spark that they had with certain other sites. Like the original Switch, brilliant idea, handheld, you can take it everywhere. Console, you can plug it into your computer. You've got Joy-Cons of unique design that can do just about anything. I like it. Good idea. I don't own a Switch. I've barely played it, but in concept, I super appreciate it. Switch 2 is rehashing the same thing with a bigger screen. It's 2. It's the second iteration of the concept. I don't see the revolutionary value proposition
Yeah.
there. Not everything needs to be revolutionary, but if you're going to sell me a new product,
Make it a
make it interesting.
make it cool. Make it revolutionary-ish.
I'm
Make it
just gonna point out that whenever Valve makes a mainline video game, it's because they're showing off a revolutionary capability.
and if you look
Whenever
at Valve hasn't created anything in a long while.
the latest let's see, they've done like a handful of spin-off games, tech demo type games recently, but if you look at their history, Half-Life was the original Half-Life was big because it set the industry standard for what a first-person shooter with a story should be like, and
Mhm.
was brilliantly done, brilliantly orchestrated, brilliantly told, revolutionary. Half-Life 2 introduced a revolutionary physics engine. With the Source engine, the whole game engine ecosystem there. The
Mhm.
Counter-Strike franchise basically set the standard for what large multiplayer first-person shooters are supposed to be. When it comes to like tight arenas. Um, Portal, Portal's like how do you even credit Portal properly? Like a lot of
They,
people
they they developed
don't
the
give it credit.
like actual like being at two places in once type of mechanic. That mechanic is super new for the time, and it's even hard for newer games to actually you know implement correctly. And the fact that they did it so well in a
Yeah,
in an actual puzzle game as well,
I
it's
think that's
like
kind of the point there is that puzzle games hadn't until recently haven't really been in the or yeah, puzzle games weren't really the bread and butter of gaming, yet Portal made puzzles interesting and have a twist, and
hmm
that was interesting technology right there. Later on down the line, of course, and some of the ones that you're pointing out here, HandLab was a tech demo. Moondust was a tech demo.
hmm
Death Job is basically a tech demo as well for the Steam Deck, whereas the previous two mentioned were for the Index. Um,
Half Life was for the VR. Uh,
yes, Half-Life Alyx was for the Index and was the mainline entry there. It's interesting because Alex is not a numbered entry on the Half-Life series because they didn't feel it contributed a definitive chapter to the story.
hmm
But it was important enough that they were releasing the VR headset that they wanted to make a flagship game to go along with it.
hmm
And thus they put it on their flagship franchise.
They also have some more Dota related stuff because they do own Dota, and they keep on adding more to the game. You know, which I also just love.
Good stuff.
It it shows that they're always looking for ways to improve. It is peak.
So we came to Valve from Nintendo because Valve's been doing revolutionary upgrades with each of their mainline software releases.
Mhm.
Until recently, Nintendo's been doing revolutionary upgrades with their mainline hardware. Like, I mean, they set the precedent back with the Nintendo 64, where the whole point of having 64 in the title was to say, hey, we have one of those fancy new 64-bit processors, which it was a marketing gimmick. I'll give you that. The 64 part, the 64-bitness was kind of unrelated to the
Mhm.
actual function of the processor and not actually used very often, but it was interesting. And good for marketing, right?
Mhm.
Revolutionary for its time because it had a powerful processor and did 3D games well.
Yes.
Um, the GameCube was their head-to-head to go against the giants in the industry of the Xbox and the PlayStation, where they're like, yes, this is powerful in your hands, and we've got this cool new idea for a controller. And it uses a CD now because that's cool.
Mhm.
Or yeah, disc. The Wii, they is where they changed strategies and made things truly revolutionary. Though they're like, let's get this in the hands of everybody and make a control system that is comfortable in anybody's hands.
Yep. They
Um,
really wanted to make it a family oriented system to the fact where you could just give it to your dad and be like, "Here you go," and your dad could
and it's intuitive.
he could just use it. He knew that like the button on top probably meant to do the thing, you know, the button on the
The one that's like
bottom.
a trigger does trigger things.
Yeah, it's like it was really intuitive. Where nowadays,
We
eh, you look at it all and you're like, oh, I don't know how to use it. Why is there two things and they disconnect and they get put back to? Wait, what? Why is the button so small?
no.
What does the B and A do? What? You know?
So yeah, so riddle me this until I've always been I played Wii when I was a kid, and I've always
Yeah,
played on
yeah.
desktop. I never had much console experience until I got a Steam Deck, and that is the mode of control. Not the only mode of control, but the built-in mode of control for the Steam
Mhm.
Deck. Until then, I rarely touched a console controller. So
Mhm.
there's a learning curve for like picking up a console controller and figuring out where the buttons are and the joystick's positioning and how to properly grip it so you can access the triggers and shoulder buttons. The Wii controller, it is a little white plastic brick that is the size and shape of your hand, and when you put your hand on it, all of your fingers know exactly where to go. And you're like, well, this feels like a sword or a magic wand. And then the game starts telling you to use it like a sword or a magic wand. You're like, this makes so much sense.
Like,
There's a button
oh,
where my thumb is. If I press it, it does the primary game function. There's a
it
button
does
for
the
my
game.
index finger. It does game things too. Mind blown.
It was really simple. And then they're like, okay, if you want to do something more complex, we'll give you something to do more complex things with, aka um the the
The Wii U?
joystick, the joystick,
Oh, the nunchuck, yeah.
the nunchuck. Yeah, it was like, okay, if you want to do more complex things, like walk around in the little Batman game that they had, here you go. You know.
It
Um.
was yeah, lots of innovation there. And really that particular spirit has not been replicated since. Now, the Switch was a callback to it, where it's something extremely accessible, and the handheld functionality puts it at the top of people's wish list because they want to be able to play games on the go. But it's not revolutionary. The handheld division of Nintendo was the DS division, right? And the home console meant for everybody was the Wii, and those developed in parallel. At some point, they decided to combine them, and the logical result of that combination was the Switch. But the Wii is the biggest thing. It's absolutely revolutionized how people view Nintendo and gave many people the accessibility to play video games for the first time and enjoy it. Um, that's not something that can be, overstated.
You know what I think Nintendo should do for the Switch 2?
What do you think
Genuinely,
Nintendo should do?
I think that there should be a Nintendo app on your phone, and they should still sell like a thing that you can attach to your phone, right? But I think it should be
Hmm.
all in your phone, right? Because if your phone is powerful enough, then it should be able to just work. If you have a phone made from in the last 5 years, it is probably more powerful than what the Switch 2 is going to be. Genuinely, you
Well,
know.
okay, so here's something interesting about that, or a couple of interesting thoughts, really.
Mhm.
One, the reason Nintendo's never going to do that is because they're
More
very
profit.
focused on keeping things in their hardware ecosystem.
Yeah.
Partially for profit, partially though because partially because if it's in a unified hardware ecosystem, then everything can be designed for exactly the same controllers and optimized for the exactly the same version, revision, and stepping of processor, and they have tight control over access and account management and whatnot. And this is important to them.
Mhm.
Their decisions to make, it's um I might not agree with them locking their ecosystem so much, but
Like
I
Apple.
I see the reasoning behind it.
Uh
Yeah.
huh.
Um but the more interesting part of that is, you know, the Switch made a departure from the Wii and Wii U, which were using PowerPC IBM processors, and the architecture that goes along with it. The Switch made a switch, haha, to using a ARM-based chip, the NVIDIA Tegra processors,
Yep.
um, which means that it uses basically, with a few minor variations, the exact same microcode as your standard phones. Everything that's not a desktop computer these days is usually ARM based. Meaning that with proper development, a Switch emulator could run natively, basically without emulation, at least at the hardware level, on a phone. Um, the like any sufficiently powerful phone could do pretty darn well. Because again, same microcode, you don't need to do the translation step
Yep.
in emulation. All you need to do is convince the game that it's running in a genuine Nintendo environment, and it'll run happily with almost no hiccups.
Mhm.
But nobody's really gone there yet. But hopefully one day Nintendo can get their heads out of their butts and stop trying to stop people from playing their games. And we can see an emulator that'll turn my gaming phone into a Nintendo Switch in the
Okay,
future.
hear me out.
I,
What if they stop trying to sell a console, right? And they start selling the games themselves, right? So you can download the game on your phone, but it's going to cost like a lot more, you know? So you can have this whole
well,
collection of games on your phone, but it's just going to cost more. They still make money off the games. The like millions and millions and millions of games that's going to be sold in the app. They can make the app cost money. They can charge people nickel and dime for everything. But if it's on your phone, it's just so much more convenient that I think people would still buy it. Like everybody
I
would.
think I think the problem with that is Nintendo kind of has the same thing as Steam, where they have the benefit of being a dominant marketplace for games,
Mhm.
but they're coming from the other direction. Instead of Steam, where it's their software on anyone's hardware, Nintendo's from the opposite direction. Anyone's software is extremely easy to develop a game for a Nintendo Switch on their hardware,
Mhm.
and they get their cut from things being ported to or developed for Nintendo Switch. Um, and so if they didn't have it on their platform, then there's no incentive for people to come to them to release a game that's going to go to a large audience of varied demographics. And they lose their marketplace if they're not the hardware that everyone has in their hands. But furthermore, as we talked about a little bit earlier, um, Apple and even Google, Microsoft are all trying to take cuts of anything installed in their operating system wherever possible by
Mhm.
making it go through the store or designated install install based kind of systems. And Nintendo would not appreciate having that cut take out of their profit margins. That's not good business.
I don't
So
think it would be though. I think that if you had to go through Nintendo, like the Nintendo app stuff, to buy the game, that the developers would still go to Nintendo because they could sell the game through Nintendo and still make huge profit margins. You know,
potentially,
I I,
I I think
I just
I
think
think
it's an
they've
ego thing.
probably. I wish it were that simple. I think they've probably assessed the exact thing you're talking about. And I think the conclusion that they've come to is that it is in their best interest as a publicly traded company, in the shareholders' best interest to do what they're doing and just do it more. And I think they know a thing or two about that. I wish that they could, do things simply and not have ego and tradition and put the long term good over the short term profit margins. But that's unrealistic, unfortunately. It's fine though.
Hmm. Indeed.
And Nintendo's gonna do what Nintendo does. I will watch from a distance and hold off on buying their stuff until they change their minds about emulators.
Yeah, I think that as much as I love to play Super Mario Smash Bros., which is the game that I grew up playing a lot, I don't need it. I'm not gonna buy a console just to play that game. I'm sorry.
And
It's not how it
at some
works.
point, yeah, at some point, your sentiment is shared by the free market, and everyone participating in it. So the market will decide whether Nintendo's continuing to be the revolutionary value proposition, um, that they've been for a long time, or if it's time for the market to shift. And
Yeah,
yeah, time will tell. That'll be interesting to watch.
time will tell, and I'm here for it. I'm really excited to see what happens because we have the Steam Deck. You can buy Steam Deck and have access to what hundreds of thousands of games, right?
The entire Steam library, give or take. You can actually look up the statistics. Steam is very happy to display those, but a massive
Mhm.
percentage of the Steam library is at least compatible. With like we'll boot up and we'll play to a certain extent. Um, and then there's
Mhm.
several thousand titles at this point that are great on deck, as they call it. Um, but like they've and that's much credit to their careful optimization of the Linux operating system that they developed, the
There's
Proton translation layer.
2,500 free playable games on the Steam Deck.
Free. Nice.
I'm going with free here, okay? If we're talking about every game, just in
Yeah, why
general,
don't
there's
you
13,000.
why don't you just narrow it down to yeah. Oh, they've got the compatibility listed right there.
Yeah,
Free
13,000.
free playable on Steam Deck is over 2,000. Total verified. So like the Valve tested themselves over 7,000. Playable as reported by the community over 13,000. I love I love that Valve is not afraid to lean into their community to give them feedback. Like
Yep.
there's a lot of people, a lot of nerds out there who are doing a lot of gaming. Although they can tell you if a game works or
Mhm.
doesn't and exactly why that is a lot of the time.
They're nerds for a reason, okay?
Hmm. I'm here for it.
Yeah, it's just there's so many games on Steam, right? You can either
There's so
buy
many games.
There's so many games, and there's so many free games, and there's so many just amazing titles. You can either pay what probably $300, $350 for the Steam or for the Nintendo Switch 2. That's probably what the price is gonna be. Or
Which is not a bad value proposition if they have good software for it.
or you can pay $275 for a verified refurbished Steam Deck from the Steam website and have access to all these games.
Which is an outstanding value proposition, especially if you already have a large catalog of games
Oh,
available that you
here.
want to play.
Let's say that you don't. But it just so happens that, my friend that did that actually knows me, and I have over 100 games that are paid for, and probably another 100 games that are free on my library, which means that I can add them to my family, and they can play all those games for free.
And this is how the free market solves, my friends.
Indeed. That.
See, maybe that's just why I appreciate Steam so much is that they're advocates for the free market.
Hmm.
They are big fans of giving us the tools and stepping out of our way so that we can go wild with it, and they just take a well-deserved dividend from all the development that we do, and turn that dividend into more brilliant products.
It,
Right?
it, it's a beautiful
You don't
cycle.
you don't get the Steam Deck if Steam wasn't successful, and Steam wouldn't be
Hmm.
successful if they're turning profits for shareholders. But because
Hmm.
they can focus on reinvesting everything that they want to, then they can make brilliantly developed products.
Indeed. Indeed. Okay. What time is it? It is time for me to go to bed. So we're gonna end this now. um,
Sleep?
it's been
What's
great.
that?
It's been great.
This has been
This
Friggin' Space Magic,
this
for
has been
lack of a better
Space
title.
Magic. Yeah, yeah, it has. Um, join us
Thank
next
you to
time.
the one person in there watching, and yeah, Sopa and Skylab Quantum Cat / Twilight, depending on what you want to call me. Bid you adieu.
All right, we'll see you.